Hello, hello, and good evening, everyone, and welcome you to our session this evening. A very good day, and thank you for joining us. It is a real pleasure to welcome you to our session. And yes, today we're going to speak about women's empowerment, a business imperative. We do thank the UNDP and its partners, along with her Corps, for hosting the second South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights and inviting us to facilitate this particular session. Joining us today, we do have with us Suhaila Khan, who is the Country Program Manager of We Empower Asia at the UN Women. And then we have Thuy and Stricha, who joins us in from Care France. And we also do have Mashouk Mujib Chaudhry, who is the Manager of Sustainability, joining us in from TPL Crew. With the minutes that go by and everyone that is precious, I actually would like to really, go deep dive already into some of the key topics that we want to address today for you. And really with this, I want to start by saying that, as recently as on Monday, the UN Women called the COVID-19 pandemic the most discriminatory crisis that women and girls have ever experienced, highlighting that women are losing jobs far more often than men, and pointing to the shadow pandemic of domestic violence. There are 47 million more women that are living on less than $1.9 a day this year. It is a tough year for women, and the last 12 months have just highlighted and dug deeper into some of the issues and challenges that are met. The pandemic has shown us how deeply gender inequality remains embedded in the world of political, social, and economic systems. And interestingly, it is also observed that women leaders are amongst those who have kept the COVID-19 transmission rates low, while countries with less effective responses to the pandemic have tended to be those with strong man approaches, which prevail and where women's rights seem to be under assault. So an interesting observation that has been made. But when we actually begin to zoom into the region of South Asia and the plight of women here, it is observed that more than 64% of the employed women in the region are in the informal employment sector, and female share of vulnerable employment is 79% in South Asia in 2017. If I may request for the next slide, I would actually like to share some statistics with all of you as we move into the session. What's also interesting to see is that the gender gap in Asia is 15% on average, impacting women's ability to invest in their families, communities, as well as the economy. In bridging the link between gender equality and sustainable supply chains, we at amfori have launched a women's empowerment program in September 2018. The key goals of our program were raising awareness and understanding the challenges that persist in these organizations and those that women face at work, as well as the business benefits of gender equality and women's empowerment. With the next slide, I would also like to highlight some more on the work that has been done. Whilst the goals that we worked upon include building management capacity to create a more enabling work environment for women through training, and increasing career prospects for women by training them for positions beyond the factory level. And to this end, at amfori, we launched projects addressing these issues in the three most significant sourcing countries for amfori members: China, India, and Bangladesh. And at this stage, allow me to introduce amfori, which is a business association, not-for-profit business association, with over 2,400 members that actually use our services and tools, including Business Social Compliance Initiative and our BEPI, which is Business Environment Performance Initiative, tools for sustainability within supply chains. And I am the India representative for amfori, Natasha Majumdar. A pleasure to host all of you this evening. In our journey at amfori, when it comes to women empowerment. We have actually initiated this in 2018. All the way in February 2018, we did prioritize women's empowerment as a key pillar to deliver upon amfori's vision. In August 2018, we have renewed the amfori BSCI system manual with integrated gender lens. And then in September 2018, we launched the Women's Empowerment Program with our projects in China, in India, as well as in Bangladesh. In May 2019, we signed the UN Declaration on Gender Responsive Standards and Standards Development. And in March 2020, we have strengthened our commitment to women's empowerment by signing the UN Women Empowerment Principles and launching the Gender Equality Strategy, which goes on till 2022. In October 2020, we have signed an MOU with the UN Women, and we have launched the Women Empowerment, the WEPS activator in this regard. Now, just before we actually turn to the panel, we turn towards you, our dear participants and the audience. We have a poll question for you. We do want to also, gain your insights and share some information with you in this session. So with that, we would actually like to launch the first poll question. You will see this on your screens right now. And the question reads, which region has the highest gender gap in labor force participation? Please select the correct answer: Latin America and Caribbean, South Asia, East Asia, or West Asia. The poll is open for you. If you're unable to see the polls, you will find the poll button on your Zoom panel, and you can actually see it over there. We pause for a few seconds whilst we allow everyone to participate in the poll. Okay, responses are still coming in, and thank you for those. Okay, we have just closed the poll question for this particular question, and we would be really happy to share the poll results with you and see, interestingly, what responses we've seen. Well, 67% of you actually highlighted South Asia, which is absolutely bang on correct, the answer. This region does have the highest gender gap in labor force participation. But it's also interesting to see that many of you did also view East Asia, Latin America, and Caribbean in the following regions that followed South Asia. So thank you for your participation in this, and we do focus on the region that does have the highest gender gap in the labor force. And with this, I actually would like to turn to our panel, and at this stage I turn to Thuy Anh, who actually joins us in from Paris. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to actually ask you, what are the main issues and shortcomings of gender inequality in South Asia?
So thank you for having us on the panel. Very glad to be here. Maybe next slide will help also. So basically, what really hinders gender equality, according to us, is social norms, but also taboos. And it does affect gender equality. First of all, I'm just realizing that I need to introduce you to CARE very briefly. So we're a global and local network. We're an international development organization, and our I guess, particularity is that we work with women and girls and we place them at the center of activities. We work in 90+ countries. And one thing relevant to this panel that I wanted to highlight is our Made by Women regional strategy in South Asia and Southeast Asia. It's about a strategy for dignified work for women in the garment sector. And we've got more than 20 years experience within the garment sector there. Our goal is threefold. The first one is really to empower women because they are the best place to really bring changes for themselves and to protect workers, supporting legal systems to do so, but also thirdly, really bring ethical supply chains to reality with partners. And how are we going to achieve these goals in the ready-made garment sector? Well, first we'll work with women, then private sector, then government. So the first one with women really is to bring their voices at the forefront and help them being leaders, but also support global women organizations. We'll then we do work at the moment with the private sector as well to improve practices, but all along the global value chains, not just at the factory level. And what we are doing also is really supporting government in terms of regional, national, international policy changes. And I'll say more on that. Next, please. So as I was just starting the answer to your question, Natasha, gender inequalities are really based, unfortunately, on social norms and taboos, such as early marriage, but also how women really manage their menses, for example, which prevent usually women, if they're prevented from safely actually managing their menses, that hinders their mobility. Women also bear the brunt of the unpaid care work. And you can see, for example, that in Bangladesh, women bear 3.43 times more unpaid domestic care work than men. Women also face sexual harassment, namely at work, but also in the community. And we'll talk more about that in the next panels. The enforcement of legislation to protect women's rights is really key. And as such, really the ratification of ILO Convention 190 is one of CARE's key recommendations and really lays the foundation in all countries. And as CARE Global, we bring that actually advocacy at national levels within different countries, thanks to our CARE colleagues in the different countries in South Asia. We also work at an international level on the Convention C190. For example, in the forum of the Generation Equality Forum is one example. And we also work with UNWOMEN as well a lot. So what else also hinders gender equality? Well, low representation of women in leadership roles, namely in legal, but also police forces, which prevents women to reclaim their rights. Women in Southeast Asia also are more likely to work in informal, South Asia are more likely to work in the informal sector than men, and women in general don't have equal pay rights. Sorry, next slide, please. So these are actually data that we gather through surveys that we do through our programming to inform after COVID what we should do. And that's really a gender study. And what we found, this is actually the voices of the workers through different studies. It's focused on Southeast Asia. But for example, in Cambodia, the first actually most important issues that they face is lack of income, as you can see, loss of jobs, which means increasing anxiety and mental pressure. But then what you can see behind is actually food insecurity and increasing burden of unpaid care work. So that gives you a picture of what's behind just if I may say, losing a job, and what is it for a woman day-to-day life, really in Cambodia. Another example is in Myanmar. The coping mechanism that were reported by workers is that they had basically to reduce the cost of their meal, but also stop paying fees for the which was represented also by 70% 62% of the women workers we've interviewed did not receive any support from government social protection schemes. And in Vietnam, what we've seen is that 87% of workers said that their income actually couldn't support and meet their basic needs in terms of family, so including their food and their grocery shopping. Not on this slide, in Bangladesh, what was reported to us was also the lack of access to food shops, but also to repay their loans, their bills, and this actually created stress and issues in terms of food security, for example. Natasha, I can, do you need more things from me or?
No, sorry, thank you about that. Sorry for that. I think there seems to be a little bit of a technical glitch here, but we're all good now. And no, thank you so much, Tui, for highlighting, these issues and challenges, and some of these that you actually speak about are so prevalent and really, it can be seen across the region, a common characteristic of the region also. The challenges that women face, which are similar in nature. And as you actually bring to the table and highlight these challenges, this is an opportunity for me to turn to you, Suhaila, from the UNWOMEN, and actually ask you, what are the global, what are like the various global frameworks that are actually available, whether it is, from organizations like yourself, but also international principles that deepen, broaden, and strengthen private sector engagement to help shift behaviors for gender responsive business conduct.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question, Natasha. And if we can have the first slide up, please. Okay, can you see the slide? I can still not see it up on screen.
So that's visible to me.
Okay, it might be then in internet connectivity. No worries. So, so the slide here has listed, some of the very prominent internationally agreed and conventions that provide frameworks for businesses to adopt gender-responsive business conduct. But what is also important to reflect on is the fact that there is a growing appreciation that businesses are key drivers for the promotion of gender equality, both at work and in societies. If we would look at the gender responsive workplace policies and practices, they have a tremendous potential to create a significant spur in decent job creation and leadership prospects for women. If the marketplace interventions of are inclusive and diverse, they can lift millions out of poverty. The marketing and branding practices have capability to change adverse norms and behaviors if they are non-stereotypical. And if the private sector invests in community interventions that addresses structural barriers, such as issues of mobility, transportation, infrastructure, social norms, as the previous panelists just talked about the various issues, then the community interventions can really transform the lives of millions of girls and women. And this, while at the same time creating business value for its own expansion by promoting economic growth, productivity, and driving innovation. And that is why all the major global frameworks, including Sustainable Development Goals, recognize that the private sector is a major player in influencing inclusive and sustainable development. And if we can move on to next slide, please. What I would also like to present at this moment is a global framework that UNWOMEN and UN Global Compact developed in 2010. This is called a Women's Empowerment Principles, and these are a set of 7 principles that offer guidance to businesses on how to promote gender equality at the workplace, marketplace, and communities. So these principles essentially provide opportunity to move beyond do no harm to do more good approach, meaning to go beyond compliances to become champions of human rights and gender equality and address social issues around the workplaces, marketplaces, and communities. What is important to note is that it is a voluntary commitment by the organization, but but the one which is driven at the highest level. So, and why we feel it is important? We feel it is important because when the agenda is driven at the highest level, it gets really translated into concrete actions and accountability across various levels within the organization. And therefore, we request companies to we request the CEOs of companies to commit to women's empowerment principles. So if you would look at the 7 principles on the slide, you would note that they follow a value chain approach to support businesses across its workplace, marketplace, and community actions. So principle 1, again, is really about reinforcing the fact that gender equality interventions should be driven at the highest level, and therefore it is about getting the commitment from the highest level to promote gender equality, but also ensuring that more women are in leadership positions. And principle 2 is really about removing stereotypes that limit women's options in the workplace and providing the policies and programs needed to support women, such as paid leave, maternity and paternity leave policies. And what we have found is that these policies have improved employee retention rates and has attracted more talent and increased employee productivity. So if you would look at principle 3, it's about providing a safe working environment which is free from violence, and also that ensures the health and safety of all women and men, including persons with disabilities and all, and including other genders as well. These principles apply to the people of other genders across. And principle 4 focuses on equal access to education, training, and mentorship opportunities, which positively impact career development. It is specifically in the textile sector that we see that there are a lot of women in the sector, but they are really at the lowest rungs. There are not many women in the leadership roles. Plus, it is very difficult for women to really, get access to career advancement, provisions within the companies. Principle 5 really looks at the marketplace policies of a company. So, for example, when a company engages with suppliers or contractors or vendors, how conscious they make an effort to engage with women-led businesses or women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises that could be integrated into the value chains of larger corporations, and what steps they take to promote women to be part of their value chains. This also means that, when they are doing the marketing or branding of their products, how conscious they are to make sure that they are not promoting or reinforcing the gender stereotypes from their own marketing and branding practices. Now, if you would look at principle 6, it is about, about really looking at the CSR activities and initiatives, but to really see that how, their CSR activities are making sure that the people who the CSR activities are aiming to benefit are part in the design and development of those activities. Plus also the fact that how, through CSR activities, these structural constraints that that limits women's participation in the workforce are addressed. So for example, again, we just touched briefly about the issues of violence, say for example, or the security or mobility or infrastructure. Now, globally, there are some 4,000 companies that have committed to women's empowerment principles. In Asia Pacific, the number is close to 1,100. And in India, there are more than 200 companies that have committed to women's empowerment principles. And what we do to support them in terms of, actually translating these commitment to practice is we work very closely with them in building their capacities to really go ahead and implement these principles. So I'll take a pause here, Natasha. And I think these are some of the frameworks that the companies can adopt and should adopt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suela, and for even highlighting those women empowerment principles, 7 key principles, which are going to be very valuable for everyone today as well as going ahead. But as you actually have shared some of the frameworks and principles available, I'd actually like to turn to you, Mashuk, if I could call upon you. To share with all our participants how local businesses can respond to the challenges that are facing women in supply chains. And with your experience and expertise at DBL Group, we really do look forward to hearing more on that. Sorry, Mashuk, we're unable to hear.
Of course. Thank you very much for the.
Yes. Mashuk, we were unable to hear you. My apologies if I think we lost you. Bear with me a moment, everyone. Okay, I think we seem to have some technical issues, and whilst we really wait for Mashuk to join us back again. Oh, Mashuk, we have you again. Can you try speaking?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Humble apologies. I mean, that's one of the problems with working from home. You know, with the net connection keeps on going up and down. Anyway, basically, in broader sense, what we think that the challenges are of three types, as it states over there: access to finance, access to markets, and lower career opportunities. This is from experiments that we have found out. So if we are briefly talking about access to finance, it's something when women-owned businesses specifically, when they want to start up with whatever business, whether it be handicrafts, whether it be as direct suppliers for apparels and textiles. So just briefly reminding about DBL Group. So DBL Group is a diversified conglomerate. So we have focused on apparels and textiles, but we have diversified to ceramic tiles and upcoming pharmaceuticals. Then telecommunication is present, dredging is present. So this particular perspective will be more from the apparels and textile side currently, but we're expanding solely to the other parts as well. But relating to the challenges once again, so when women are starting with new businesses, access to finance is a big part, but it be related to registrations or procuring and everything together. So that's one of the challenges that they have. Access to markets would be another issue because in a lot of cases we tend to see that women, whether it be handicrafts, whether it be handmade other products and everything. So what we've seen that this is usually the case. So the market approach for other products, I mean, handicrafts and everything. So that's fantastic and all. But what we're more focusing on is diversifying. So as direct suppliers to companies. So that would be another issue. And lower career opportunities. This is another interesting thing that we found out, that whether it be the stereotyping of the society within South Asia or other countries, so what we see that they tend to be more within limited number of departments, limited number of roles. That's an unfortunate case. I mean, for NGOs and civil service organizations, we do see more diversifications within it. But within the corporate world, we tend to see that it's just a few departments and that's it. There are lesser career opportunities. Well, for whatever it be the reason, whether it be the confidence or whether it be the access by itself. Now, what the business response, what we have, just briefly talking about some of our programs. So we have a female supervisor leadership program. That's our in-house program that we have. And what we do is, it has been greatly inspired from a program, the Women in Factories Initiative by CARE Bangladesh. So what we did, what we took the learning from CARE's program, Wi-Fi program, and then we expanded with technical knowledge, and then we are promoting women workers to female supervisors. Then a kind of a similar program we have with Shobola. So in this particular case, since we had the expertise of the female supervisor leadership program, we have this partnership, Shobola, with an amfori CS Center and DBL, with the objective being the same, but it's expanding in a greater form. So with female supervisor leadership program, that's our own program, but with Shobola, we're launched with other factories as well, other companies as well. One of the newer programs that we have is Target Gender Equality with the UN Global Compact, which the workshops just ended. We're basically ended phase one of it. So this one is an interesting part because it goes back to Women Empowerment Principle 1, that at all levels, women's participation. Target Gender Equality particularly focuses on the management levels, how to increase the number of women in the management level at all levels for that matter. So when we talk about the first two programs, Female Supervisor Leadership Program and Shabola, that's more on the worker side. But now we're moving on to the management side as well. She Trade's Commonwealth Project and the Corporate Connect Program, they have a particular similarity because this is empowering women within the value chain. So, but as suppliers. So it's not our own employees we're talking about, but rather as suppliers, how we can engage with them. So the trainings are there. So through the Trace product and the Corporate Connect projects. So they are providing the trainings to the women entrepreneurs, the women-owned businesses, so that how to engage with it as well. For example, with ITC, the She Trades project, we hosted an internal workshop. So we invited the women-owned businesses. It was a partner workshop between ITC and DBL Group. So we basically discuss on what are the business styles and how to basically become proper entrepreneurs through our knowledge that we had. And one of the other issues would be policy review targeting women. It can be as simple as women are encouraged to apply, because that particular statement, what we feel, what we have seen, that would boost the morale of women to just apply for a job, whether it be whatever sector it be. So whether it be in, for example, in an engineering sector. So we have the policy, we just
Okay,
encourage women.
more.
Thank you very much. So once we start policy reviewing, so these things would be helping them further. So it's just, like I said, just simply starting that women are encouraged to apply, and then we would be providing internal opportunities as well. This is basically what we see are the challenges and the possible business responses can be. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mashuk. Thank you for sharing that, the insights, and of course, the collaborated efforts that you also spoke about, with Shabhola, with amfori, or even what you're doing with the other organizations. Definitely, there's value in collaboration as you bring in. But let me move to another poll question, actually. So for all of you, dear participants that join us, we have one more poll question for you, and we'd love to hear from you and have your participation. So we actually moved to the poll question, and we launched that for you about now. You should be seeing the question on your screen. Sexual harassment at work is. Please complete the sentence by selecting the correct answer. Gender-based violence and harassment, or manifestation of sex discrimination, violation of human rights, often based on abuse of power, or all of the above. We leave the poll open for you for a minute to respond, and then we will share the results. So we can see some of your responses, and we have that now consolidated for you on your screen. Thank you for responding to this question. And yes, as 80% of you have actually highlighted and recognized over here, all of the above are classified as sexual harassment. And this is something that, we do want to see more collaborated efforts in eliminating and mitigating. And, that's why actually what we would like to really focus on for you now are, some of the, share with you some of the roles of international organizations, such as UNWOMEN and the government in protecting women from sexual harassment. And also, Suhail, I'll call upon you for this to, also highlight the role and also share the challenges and potential solutions. Really looking at this right now from the pillars, the 3 pillars of the UN guiding principles, and looking at protect and how this can support to mitigate sexual harassment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for the question. And I would like to put upfront the fact that tackling gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the workplace should be a major part of the conversation when we are trying to tackle the issues of women's labor force participation in India and in South Asia, because it is one of the crucial factors that play a very key role in women's participation in economic opportunities. Now, what is also critical to understand is the fact that there is a cost of sexual harassment to businesses. So in 2018, Deloitte conducted a study to calculate what is that cost. And they found that it cost $2.6 billion in lost productivity, $0.9 billion in financial costs. Each of the case of harassment represented around 4 working days of lost output. Employers bore 70% of the financial costs, government 23%, and individuals 7%. Lost well-being for victim or survivor was an additional $250 million, or nearly $5,000 per victim/survivor on average. Beyond this, there are other costs that are not quantified. So, for example, the failure of organizational culture, reputation damage, or the loss of investors, lack of consumer confidence, and loss of potential talent. So therefore, there is a value in creating an environment or organizational culture that prevents sexual harassment at the workplace in the first place. And people working in the company or a factory or any establishment should be able to recognize it and take actions early on. Now, international organizations and government play a very important role in tackling gender-based violence in the world of work. For example, in India, we have come a really long way from the 1997 Vishaka guidelines to the 2013 POSH, which is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace Act, to provide safe working environment to women. But what is very important is that the implementation is something which needs more attention. There is a need to make sure that the law is implemented in a timely and effective manner. There are several researches that show that that compliances by the companies with the act have remained low, and often also the fact that women also themselves lack awareness of these laws and their legal rights. And what is also important is that women in the informal sector do not have proper access to redressal mechanism. And considering the fact in South Asia and in India, the highest percentage of women workers are in the informal sector, this becomes really a key consideration. Also the fact, that sexual harassment doesn't operate in a vacuum. It is embedded and it stems in a cultural environment that hold patriarchal values and gender-based discrimination, right? So government needs to ensure that the laws are comprehensive enough, effectively implemented, and also ensure that there is awareness about these laws among women, and that people are encouraged to report complaints. International organizations such as UN here can play really a very important role in generating awareness around issues of sexual harassment, but also trying to address these issues of cultural shift and gender bias by creating a dialogue between different stakeholders. They can also leverage their technical expertise to assist the private sector in implementing national laws and policies, and also ensuring their compliance with international commitments and norms. Also, what is important is that sure. I'll just take 1 minute to say that how, for example, UNWOMEN is supporting this is through, again, organizing trainings for the companies that have signed up women's empowerment principles to really address and build their capacities to be compliant with the law. Also, the fact that we are undertaking a research together with UNDP in South Asia within the companies to really understand the cost of sexual harassment in the region. And we hope that this would provide us a better platform or data to prove the business case for prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. I'll stop here, Natasha. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sohaila, and can't agree with you more. It's even when there are laws in place, what's the most important thing is the implementation and the enforcement of these laws and the right frameworks to actually work with that at an individual, local, downsized organizational level. And yes, it definitely, when we talk about gender equality or we talk about women empowerment, the issue and the challenge of sexual harassment or gender-based violence must be on the forefront. it is one of the primary that would help in bring in parity. But with this, actually, may I turn to you, Tui, to speak more from the aspect of remedy and the pillar 3 when we talk about the challenges in accessing remedy. And this is something that's also very real for whether it is women in the rural areas or even in the urban areas and with various socio-cultural backgrounds that create barriers. What can government and businesses do more to ensure that victims of sexual harassment have access to effective remedy?
So I would like first to reinforce exactly what actually Suela has mentioned, and you as well. So to tackle sexual harassment, the foundation is the legal background. So ILO Convention, again, 190, and its ratification is really, really key for us and for everyone. And because really to change norms, which are also the backbone and behind sexual harassment, we need the enforcement of laws and a legal framework. To respond more directly to your question, maybe the next slide, please, on how to access remedy and what are the challenges in accessing those remedies and solution. I would say, first of all, that grievance mechanisms is actually can be sometimes an issue because workers don't necessarily have confidence in the grievance mechanisms that are in place. Maybe they won't be taken seriously, maybe they will have backlashes and fear backlashes from their management or even in families or being ostracized, socially ostracized, I mean, by their peers or by their families. So it is an issue for workers. And for that, you need really a transparent and functional mechanism in place. And to do that, you actually need staff trained on how to handle and investigate complaints properly, which brings me to a second point, having a survivor-centered approach. CARE actually has worked with Better Work on standard operating procedures to address sexual harassment and gender-based violence. This approach, I'm going to get into more details, but this survivor-centered approach, it is really about really recognizing basically the rights, but also the needs and also the wishes of the survivors are really in place and at the center of all the actions. And unfortunately, often employers and policies, namely, need actually a better understanding of this specific approach. So as mentioned to you before, it's part of 7 principles. The first one, which is very logical and which is much needed and a challenge to access remedy, is the confidentiality. So ensuring that maintaining the information of the identity or the information about the case actually kept confidential unless otherwise voluntarily agreed. The second principle is actually ensuring consent. So the individual informed consent is voluntarily obtained before any action is taken. The third one is very logical as well. It's basically a do no harm approach. And the fourth one, we just spoke about it, is really putting the victim at the center. So having that survivor or victim centered approach. The next one, the fifth one, the fair, is really to ensure equal treatment and refraining basically from any discrimination. So based on gender, on sexual orientation, on ethnicity, or any other characteristic. The sixth one is to actually really learn from whatever you will put in place in terms of anti-sexual harassment or gender-based violence. The last one, the seventh one, will be actually working towards gender equality and inclusion for all. So it's bringing basically all your learnings from the mechanisms and policies you're putting in place into your strategy. Next, please. I'm not sure if you're seeing that. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So what else can we do to reduce sexual harassment? Well, that's actually some learnings from a project that I'll detail after, which is the STOP project that we run actually in 4 countries, in 40 plus factories. And it was really bringing partners together to promote gender equality that we managed through this program. So it's really working with others. And because really what we need to understand is that sexual harassment is an individual issue, but really it should be a global and collective concern. So the first point is that we use an ecological model intervention to act. So we work with factories within the workplace at different levels, the norms, the policies, the practices, but also the leadership organization. Then we work at the community level and at the global society level, as I was mentioning, the legal framework, for example. But what is also important is to really shift the workplace norms. So it's having champions, identifying them and really helping them support those norm shifts. It's about engaging leadership, and it can be very concrete by having actually pledges signed as a commitment to really reduce sexual harassment. It's of course developing progressive procedures, looking at your complaints mechanism, what's working, what's not working. We said that before, having staff trained and a referral pathway that is really clearly mentioned. And last but not least, it's about building skills and capacities. It's very important to keep reinforcing that. And it can be done in very simple ways through role plays, multimedia, but also having really structured messages so that everyone actually really understands what we mean in your structure by sexual harassment. So it's very concrete, very simple. Next, please.
You have a minute.
Yeah, so I won't be too long. The STOP project is about creating safer workplace. It's a factory-based intervention with three basically parts. The first one is tools for workplaces, policies and systems. So it's really looking and analyzing your workplace policies and system and accompanying you to create those that are really relevant. The second pillar is building the skills, capacity building of your staff, HR, management staff, so they understand better what is sexual harassment and working with anti-sexual harassment committee. And the last pillar is really creating a better understanding at the workers' level and engaging with them in very simple terms. Hope I was in 1 minute.
Thank you so much for sharing these details with us, and also highlighting the various aspects of a remedy that can be available, and also the challenges that are there. With this, I want to take a step back actually to pillar 2 and really talk about respect. And whilst we do have the protect frameworks, and then we do have the challenges with remedy, what we need to really see is how does it work with respect. So what is the role of business to ensure that women's rights are respected? And what are the challenges in preventing and detecting sexual harassment cases? And Ashok, may I please call upon you to share with us some information on this front?
Of course. Thank you very much. You can just get rid of slides. Next one, please. Thank you. So the very first part would be as simple as it is to have anti-harassment policies. And of course, by policies, we just don't mean written documents and implementation of them as well. One other part would be the psychosocial counseling, because what we feel like that this is required because it's to understand that in a lot of cases, people will not be, a certain statement may be made, which others may take it offensively, which women may take it offensively, or vice versa. So these sort of psychosocial counselings would really help them out, because otherwise, I mean, there is no proper communication. And that's interesting that relatively, I had someone tell me that within the family issues, although this is slightly different, but then again, it's relevant as well. Because within a family, a husband will be thinking in one way, but a wife would be thinking in another way. But once that understanding is there, that these are two different individuals who are thinking differently, once that psychosocial counseling comes in, so there would be lesser amounts of harassment, and there would be greater of women's rights as well. The third part that we say is inclusivity of women in all levels. So as we discussed a little bit earlier, that we focus programs more on workers initially, but now we've started focusing more on the management staff as well, because that's one of the levels that we need to improve upon as well. Because it's not just at the base of the pyramid, it's all the parts of the pyramid. That's why inclusivity of women in all levels. The fourth way that we can ensure respecting women's rights, that would be the training for male employees on gender norms. I would emphasize on the male employees because once again, it kind of relates to the psychosocial counseling, but where the counseling is more on an individual basis, this would be more like a generalized basis. Because referring to one of CARE's program that we had, the Women in Factories initiative, that was in the initial part, the foundation training included both men and women. Because the idea of it is to understand, have the particular respect for each other. They are of different genders, but that doesn't matter, but particular mutual respect and everything. It can be as simple as that, you should be respecting other people. These simple words themselves would be adding value to it. And one of the other ways what we can feel is respecting to further enhance the respect of women's rights would be the women empowerment principles, the implementation of it. The very first part would be having what we've done in Target Gender Equality Global Complex Program, that the gender gap analysis tools. So that really helped us understand that where are the areas that where we can improve upon. And once we do the gap analysis, the gender gap analysis tool, so what that helps us is it helps us put up a sort of a rank that whether we in the improver level, whether we're in a starter level or an achiever, or etc., or a leader role. So these are the things that gives us the points. Okay, these are the areas that we can focus on. It's not about feeling bad that okay we did not get a good score, but rather an opportunity on how we can move forward. So if you can just move to the next slide, please. So this is basically, as it says, the challenges in preventing and detecting sexual harassment. A lot of the points would be, in alignment with our panelists as well, because first up, there's a lack of strong awareness on grievance mechanisms. There are grievance procedures, but what we can see that in a lot of cases, within the worker level and within the management level, there's a difference. Workers would be more aware. Amazing, the workers are relatively more aware of grievance issues than the management side. Because in a lot of cases, we may assume, okay, fine, management side, obviously they will, but there is actually, in reality, a gap because workers are receiving the trainings and everything. But in the management side, there may not be there are trainings definitely, but there may not be formalized trainings and everything. So that's one of the gaps that is there. And another important part is feeling of discomfort on sharing about harassment. This is directly from a woman who will be stating that they do feel uneasy on, should I be telling that? I mean, whether it be to a male colleague, at best they tell it to a female colleague. But whether they'll be telling to the line manager who may be a male. And that goes to the third point as well, fear of losing job and dignity. These 2 points are very much related because whether it be a fear of a real fear or perceived fear, they might be losing job or they might be harassed, further harassment over harassment. So this particular fear is there. Another one, having less confidence on getting justice. So it's kind of summing up together that they have this perception that I will not be getting justice, even if the justice system is fair. But whether it be lack of proper communication, there will be a little bit of a gap. A lot of women, I should say, will be having less confidence, as let's state it a little bit earlier. And the last part, all cases may not be reported. This, once again, a lot of correlation between the points, but all cases will not be reported. So we might be stating, an organization might be stating that we have 0 cases of sexual harassment. That's fine, sounds good. But when we dig deeper through counseling sessions and everything, there are more and more cases will be coming up. Because once again, it's fear of losing job or dignity, feeling of uneasiness, then having less confidence. So these are the problems that come in. So all cases may not be reported. So this is a very important part. And this is a very crucial part as well. Because once we understand, once cases are coming in, we understand that there's a problem. Once cases are not coming in, we tend to assume that, okay, everything's fine and dandy. So this would be for my part. I think I made it within time.
Thank you so much, Mashuk. Very, very important point that you make, particularly in the end, that just because cases are not reported, that does not mean that cases don't exist. And really this comes back to the possibilities to really bring these issues and challenges to the table by women who are facing so many other socio-cultural challenges, and you know, the surface level is not sufficient. Surface level analysis when it comes to sexual harassment, there must be support available to go deeper, and the opportunity for women, you know, along with the counseling support that you also mentioned, to raise these issues. Thank you so much, all three of you, you know, Tui, Suhaila, and Mashouk, for really bringing perspective on this one particular deep dive that we wanted to bring to the table, which was on sexual harassment. And with this, dear attendees, I actually turn towards you. We would love to hear your questions, your queries. And if you have any, this is the time that we can actually respond to them. Any questions that you may have for Suhaila, Tui, or Mashouk, you can post them on the Q&A chat, and I would bring them to attention. I do see one already. I'm going to begin to read it. I have not had a chance to screen through it yet, but I read it for all of us. In terms of challenging unhealthy taboos regarding female bodies and sexuality, particularly focusing on menstruation, as I understand, this is a big factor contributing to gender-based discrimination and violence. Plan International does a lot of work in this area. I'm just wondering, in terms of capacity building for both male and female workers on this topic, what has been the general response or impact? Is there any data on any specific initiatives targeting this issue? And thank you for also sharing that this session is engaging, and it's lovely for you to be a part of it. So I really open the question to the panel. You know, Suhaila, Mashouk, Tui, from efforts that I've seen underway, and any stats that you have, what really is the general response or impact of gender-based discrimination, violence training, particularly focused on menstruation, if you have been familiar with this? Would any of you like to take this? Yeah, yep. Sure.
Sorry, so because I brought that up as well. So what concretely what we do at CARE is we do address menstruation in numerous projects. It's usually namely more at school levels for girls, educational project, but we do have also women empowerment projects, and especially the project on sexual harassment and also gender-based violence, but also maternal and health care. So it really is part of different projects. As it happens, we're about to launch into a project. So it's not quite linked to workers in the factory. There's one part. But what we realized is we wanted to have a holistic approach of menstruation issues and menstrual hygiene management, as it is called in our jargon. Basically working on three pillars, working first on sensitization, raising awareness and advocacy. So same principle as maybe you've felt through our presentation on sexual harassment. So it's working at the legal level first, so the bigger level, and then working at the more local legal level and also norms, but also in the curriculum of the schools. And then actually working with the communities, as part of that, raising awareness within industrial parks. So it's concretely, it's about making sure there are also toilets that are appropriate. So that there are standards about what is a toilet to manage well menstruation, having a bin, having access to water to clean your hands, having lights, and so on. So that part is another pillar in our programming. So we'll work on actually ensuring basically water and sanitation and toilets are fine. But on this project I'm mentioning, which is going to happen in Ethiopia, we are focusing on schools. So it's just the difference. The third pillar is also ensuring products are available. So that's the part of things we do within our trainings, within factories. We ensure people are aware, and that's actually a completely open choice. So we don't orient them on specific products, although we will promote basically pads that are reusable because it makes more sense from our perspective. We also want sustainability, but also we're mentioning cups, for example, as well as part of a holistic approach. So it's basically promoting the production of those products and promoting the distribution and ensuring people are aware and that the demand is also increasing. So that's the third pillar. So having those three pillars, sensitization, working on the production and demand, but also working on wash is for us the way to tackle issues on menstruation. And at the factory level, again, we do that, but at small scale, unfortunately, because I think that topic is now becoming more important internationally, but it's rather new. And Plan is having project, CARE has project, PSI has project. Quite a few NGOs are really willing to work together to change that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tui, for bringing in perspective there and taking that question live. You know, as we take questions from you, we actually have another one from you, for you, our dear attendees and participants. So one more poll question coming up for you, and we're going to release that onto your screens in just about a moment. And you should see it now. In Asia Pacific, what percentage of women are in senior management? And please select the right answer here. What is the percentage of women in senior management? We'll keep the poll open for a minute for you to respond. Okay, we'll be closing the poll in about a few seconds. Okay, interesting. So many of you over here have 69% of you over here have recognized it to be at 14%. And then thereafter, we have 19% of you who recognize this to be at 27%, followed by 13% of you that say the right answer would be 32%. And none of you believe that the answer should be 0% over there, which is correct. So really the correct answer over here is 27%. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I do see a stable internet, but yes, so the correct answer over here is 27%. Interesting. Okay, let's kind of move on to really where this question takes us, and that's where I want to talk about women in leadership. And this is the other deep dive topic that we wanted to present to all of you attending today. You know, we wanted to discuss a bit on the challenges again and approach this topic from the aspect of the three pillars of protect, respect, and remedy. What are really the interesting aspects of the interventions or the preventions for women in leadership positions? And in this regard, I actually would initially at the outset turn to you again and ask you, what are key reasons for which women are underrepresented in leadership positions in the South Asian supply chains, and what remediation efforts can be made?
Thank you. So what are really the key things to consider when we're thinking about career advancement and women in leadership position, as you highlighted? Well, first of all, really social norms again. Just as for sexual harassment and globally, really they prevent women's ability to progress in the workplace, and barriers are, for example, accessing trainings and building up skills, which brings me to the fact that hard skills are usually ranked higher than soft skills, which means that when they have interviews, it is an issue basically for women to get the jobs in leadership positions. Also, women might actually face backlashes from their own family or their peers if they really apply to higher ranked positions, basically in the workplace. So all that together it can be an issue and prevent actually women from advancing in their careers. Also, they often lack confidence and the soft, so in communication, I mean, soft skills communication, for example. So working on their agency and allowing them to do so is very important. Then I'm going to go on to actually potentially what the business could do and must do, if I may. So next slide, please. So businesses, I'd like to look at it in 3 buckets of what can they do to promote women in leadership position. First, really, it will be looking at strengthening their policies and initiatives. So, for example, the recruitment process within the factories or the factories groups, recommendation is that it's standardized and more gender sensitive. Second point would be to really look at training on the policy to support career advancement. Too many often people are not aware of what it means in terms of career advancement within the factories or the factory groups. So being more open to that. Also training and to support women agency, so their soft skills, but also their hard skills is something that is much needed. And it requires going beyond occupational health and safety. And that was part of the recommendation we had drawn from a project in Bangladesh that we run. We have quite a few experiences in Asia, but also in Bangladesh, we've got a strong programming on actually women career advancement. It's also really arranging male sensitization sessions. So it's male sensitization sessions about also, of course, gender, but also women in leadership position, which in turn will influence the global issues around gender and women, not just in leadership position, but on sexual harassment, as we've seen before, and gender balance within your organization. The second part I would like to look at is how to accompany career advancement further. Well, it's simply also conducting a needs assessment. So asking the women in your factories, but also the men, what are really the needs in terms of soft skills and hard skills? What do they need to do? And in terms of skills, what do they need to acquire to advance in their career? It's also having a complementary policy for career advancement. So it's considering also establishing a career progression map, considering it's looking at the future. What does your company, for example, needs in future in terms of future skills, and how can you ensure there is a path that is also gender sensitive to that? Incentivize also your HR manager, but also factory personnel to implement those activities and to make sure that workers are aware is very key. So it can be even financial incentives, but it's also, first of all, ensuring that people are sitting down together, are understanding the same thing and identifying what are the needs. The last bucket I would like to look at is supportive relationships, because although you might do things at your business level, really what needs to be also done is strengthening the relationship at the workplace level, but also potentially even influencing the ones in the family sphere. So it's improving engagement of online managers, but also supervisors on that topic. So they're aware that women leadership in position, as mentioned before, is okay. And there's no ostracization of women if they express that desire, or they are even encouraged if they can actually spot women that have the leadership position, they can actually mention that. It's also creating provision for counseling of the household members that it is okay, and it can be beneficial even for women to advance their career and change, again, so that women don't actually face that ostracization or backlash within their family. It's also engaging with other stakeholders to offer opportunities, being training centers, other your peers within your industry as well, to see what exists and how to create a standardization so that it's, of course, women in leadership positions sensitive, but also gender sensitive. Next, please. So what else can business do? I wanted to tweak a bit the question and really look at women in leadership position, also at leadership in general, and really share with you what we found, which will help women being in leadership position. It's really using what I would call our evidence-based solution to address the key issues of women leadership. So what we have, I mentioned the STOP program. It's really creating safer and respectful workplace. So it's addressing sexual harassment, but by addressing sexual harassment, you're creating safer workplaces. You're creating an opportunity for women to rise to the challenge of career advancement. What we found as well is our ECATAB model. It was developed in Bangladesh. It's been around for more than 10 years. And it's based on the fact that women will create change together for themselves. It's a very collective action network, very powerful. We have beautiful testimonies of women basically raising their voice, actually raising even for a whole factory, for example, the importance of respecting some of the rules of equal pay. So it might be frightening maybe for business, but it is really, in a way, very encouraging, because you are empowering your workers to be also more responsible and more in charge. So really looking at leadership in terms of how can you bring a collective of women to better understand social issues fully, and how you can bring them to a stage where they are a voice you can talk to, they're structured, and you can together evolve towards women leadership, which in turn, well, as it was mentioned by Suhela, save you many funding and budgets for in terms of productivity or any other issues. So I've mentioned, and it has also mentioned by DBL, that we had a We in Factory program, which was really focusing on women's leadership to promote opportunities. And looking ahead also, of course, is really how can we all together really working with the industry, with the legal frameworks, with institutions, and also with NGOs, of course, and women association, to really develop new approaches to support women so they can be better equipped for the future of work that is changing, to build a resilient economy that will be hopefully coming soon and after COVID period, and that will encompass, of course, women being leaders and going career advancement, but really going beyond that and having a global approach altogether. Over to you, Natasha.
Thank you so much, Tui, for highlighting this, and allow me to actually right away turn towards you, Mashuk, and allow me to ask you, what can business do to support the development and increase of women in leadership positions in the textile supply chain?
Thank you very much. Can we just have the slides, please? So as it's loading, so one of the first things that I'll go back to the gender gap analysis tool. One second. The next slide, please. So because that helps us identify the initial areas, and for that matter, even advanced areas where we can properly identify and move along, and how to properly empower women, and how to put women in different roles and everything. The next point, what we say, the specific policy on women inclusion, but which has been endorsed by the board. Because as I said, if the board has to be on board with sustainability. So once this comes in, so there is a direct commitment from the board. There is, in one way, is to say a pressure from the board, because they are now, they will be now making people responsible. Yes, a policy would be there. So whether let it start in an initial way. For example, the ones who are migrating, so those positions will be filled up by women, and likewise, it can go to the advanced levels as well. Another interesting part that we learn from the target gender equality workshops is, excuse me, setting up a diversity, equity, and inclusion council. So, for example, when there is an interview going on, so there has to be an equal ratio of men and women both within the panel. So that would help us. And the advantage of the DEI committee is that a DEI council, it would be that it's not just for women empowerment, but rather if you're going for other roles as well. For example, including people with special needs. So these DEI councils will really help out in that particular case. And another point, what we saw that is succession planning, but focusing on women and men equally, since we're talking about gender equality. And there's a particular focus on succession planning because we tend to see that in a lot of cases that's missing. That when whether it be however the hierarchy be it, that's not a particular focus point. But if there's a succession planning, so people will, whether it be women, whether it be men in this particular case, that they will be feeling empowered and more, taking responsibilities within it. Another part, what we feel like it's important is that having role models or champions within the organization. So they would be acting as, I mean, for example, if we are talking about any company which has a limited number of women within their workforce, but they do have a few women who are within the relatively senior management. So they would be the role models for others. Those who are coming in the entry levels or mid levels, they will be more motivated and they will be going further within the organization, motivated further to move up. Another interesting part would be the publicly disclosed targets on women inclusion. So once publicly disclosed, once again, the responsibility and the accountability comes in. So once we, for example, if we're referring to our buyers, setting up sustainability targets. So when these things get in, so automatically the commitment will be coming in. So that's the same case for having targets for women as well. The last 2 points are.
You have about 30
okay.
seconds. Yeah, thank you.
That's good. That's good enough. Involvement and in individualistic decision making and participation in control and corrective action. This is one of the learnings that we have. This is where more men are participating, but we feel like women should be participating as well. So thank you.
Thank you much for highlighting that over there. Suhail, allow me to turn to you right towards at this moment to really highlight and share with us how can collaboration and joint initiatives promote women in leadership roles?
Thank you, Natasha. And I would like to reflect a little bit on the fact that we got to just know that the women's representation in the leadership position in the Asia Pacific region is 27%. And if I just quote the example of India, it is really somewhere between 13 to 14%, and that too within the companies that have listed as part of the National Stock Exchange of India. Now, and this despite the fact that there is a provision, a mandatory provision in the Companies Act that requires certain companies to appoint at least one women director on the board. Now, this is, of course, a very progressive legislation, but there have been global studies that have established that if we really want women to have an impact and change board dynamics, influence board dynamics, it requires a minimum of at least 3 women to have their voices and agendas heard. Now, companies with 3 or more women directors have women's economic empowerment interventions in all 3 stages of women's economic life cycle, which is preparation, entry to the workforce, and growth. So what is required is really an ecosystem approach where various stakeholders, including government, international organizations, and businesses come together. Now, of course, one of the examples of this collaboration is the Target Gender Equality, which is really led by UN Global Compact, but is essentially looking at implementation of Principle 1 of Women's Empowerment Principles, which is to enhance women's leadership in management roles. But also what we have tried to do, Natasha, within India is that the fact that we have collaborated with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India, say, for example, to really see that how, gender responsive the National Action Plan development policy is on business and human rights, to make sure that, gender is not left out from the entire plan. And we really hope that, when the National Action Plan is finalized, we would be able to see some of these considerations, because it is very important that when there is a legislation, we have seen, certain steps are being taken. But what we have also realized is the fact that, what is more important is to also ensure a strengthen need to strengthen the accountability and transparency mechanism. So, for example, in one of the studies with private sector companies, we found that, UK and France requires companies to report on pay gap. And what we found was that the multinational Indian companies report it there. And they do not report back in India the same information, because the legislation doesn't require here to report them. So what we learned and we found is that it is important that, that there is mandatory requirement on companies to include information on gender balance in governance structures and senior management, when they are preparing their annual and business responsibility reports. And also important for the company's leadership to track progress and report on gender diversity and take corrective actions to bridge these gaps. Like I said, that there are multiple stakeholders that can keep if they push from their perspective and their strengths, the boundaries, the change can definitely happen. And what is required is to really disrupt the discriminatory practices, norms, policies, and structures through legislative and mandatory framework, but also a lot of capacity building and a lot of sensitization and coordination is required. Thank you.
Thanks, Suhaila. And thanks for sharing that perspective with us. Whereas we actually would be happy to open the floor to more questions from the audience at this stage. Okay, I believe my video is back on. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technical issues. A quick open of the floor to all of you, our attendees. We are happy to take your questions. And should you have any, you can put them into the Q&A chat box over there. And as you think over your questions, I turn to our panel, and I once again, thank all of you for all the insights that you've brought in. Whether it's Tuyan from CARE or Mashuk, Chaudhry from DPL and Suhaila Khan from UN Women. We've had, it's been a real pleasure to welcome you and to listen to your insights. As well as, one key takeaway for me from our discussions was really the value of collaboration and the impact and influence that collaborated and joint efforts can have when it comes to driving change. Sometimes change is at a smaller level than what is required, but sometimes it is, snowballing into something larger, and that's where we're headed. I was reading something really interesting this morning on achieving gender parity, and really ironically and sadly, something that I read highlighted that it's going to be about another 130 plus years before we can actually achieve gender parity at the rate at which we're going globally. And I know each region has its own specific count of years, but that's a really long way to go. That's more than a century ahead. So we really need to take big and bold steps, as we work towards equality, equity, really gender equity, because it's not always a half and half, but really a fair situation that we require in the world to work together. So, as we await perhaps a question or two from the audience, I would like to take the opportunity. Maybe Suhaila, if I could ask you to highlight, how can companies join the women empowerment principles in the WEPS activator? And as you take that forward, I do want to reiterate and highlight once again, amfori and UN Women are working very closely on this. And in fact, we have an initiative with UN Women at amfori for amfori members to be a part of the WEPS activator and also a journey ahead in assessing, the implementation of the women empowerment principles. So over to you, Suhaila, to share how many more can join this initiative. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Natasha, for this opportunity. Signing a women's empowerment principle is a very, very simple process. We normally request the CEOs to sign a CEO statement spot and upload it on a website along with a very simple application form information here after my response so that people can log into the website. Also, how to know to commitment or to actually implement that. So Mashuk already mentioned about the gap analysis tool that's available for any private sector company to just go ahead and take that tool. What it does is that the benchmark of the company exists in terms of its priorities, missions, policies, etc., gender equality and women's empowerment vis-a-vis the 7 principles. So it really gives you an assessment of what level you are. Are you at the beginners level, or at the achievers level, or at the leaders level? And where we have very recently is really an active tool that if you need that information to that action plan tool, it really gives action points to take up to really address the issue area requires further strengthening within your companies. Very importantly, this tool is anonymous. Even we do not get to see the data. We get to see aggregated data from all the companies that have taken the tool. So it's really very secure. The data is only visible to companies take the tool, and it completely rests on the company should it wants to publish this data to share with larger audience. So really it is very sort of practical tool and guidance, and irrespective of the company being a web signatory or not, they can just go onto the website, Google Web Gap Analysis tool. You can just go ahead and take that tool. And I'll just have a point and we'll stop here is also that, in India specifically, under We Empower Asia program, we are really working very closely with the companies to train them on developing that plan and also strengthening capacities to address those areas that require further strengthening after they have identified, post their analysis of the results from gap analysis tool. So, please feel free to reach out to Natasha, to me, and we'll be happy to support you in any which way to join this global movement.
Thank you so much, Sohela, and thanks for highlighting that. We actually have no questions at this stage, no further questions from the participants and the attendees. And as we are a few minutes away, literally 2 minutes away from concluding the session, allow me to really conclude by highlighting two kind of takeaways from the two topics that we did deep dive into, and really it's raising awareness, it's enforcement of strong anti-harassment policies, psychological support, physiological support, gender sensitization, which are only the essentials. It's not the whole solution, but these are only the bare essentials, as our panelists have shared, that will help us to meet the challenges of gender-based violence and sexual harassment that we discussed in a section prior. And also that, it's still sad to see that when we look across the world, we still see that women's voices remain missing from the highest levels of leadership. And, we hear one of the key takeaways is that we don't just merely need training for women. Yes, of course, skill development and equipping them is important. Equipping us is important. But in addition to that, what we really need to do is train those in power on how to build inclusive institutions, for change. It is the top leadership commitment that is essential. So it's training that starts right from the top on including gender, all gender, and filtering that down also. So ladies and gentlemen, we need big and bold steps ahead, and we must make them and begin today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a lovely day ahead. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.